Okay, thank you. Well, what are you watching now? And what were you watching then? Well, these are some of my first pictures. Look, so this is a picture I found when I was clearing up my house a while ago. So this is art that I did when I was about 6 years old.
Our therapist?
No, that was just art. And now, this is not 6 years old, this is much later, this is 1975. So I'm probably about 15 or 20 years old. I got more into representational art. And these are, one of the features, as you can see, even in my children's pictures, was pictures of houses and landscapes. And it continues to be houses, landscapes, and people are the things that are coming out in my pictures. This is actually in Switzerland, in the Val de Travers, which is one of the first sort of places I went off on my own traveling. Because as we grow up, we often start traveling around the world, and wherever I went, I drew pictures. And this is one of my first sort of periods of travel. This was another kind of art that I did at that time. I was very into op art and non-representational art as well. And very impressed by Victor Vasarely and Bridget Riley and the other op artists of the period. And I was also interested in this sort of thing. And I'd never been outside of Europe at this time. Oh, no, that's true. I'm not entirely sure. I've been to America. Anyway, I was very into fantasy paintings of different sorts of landscapes. And here you can see, well, it's nowhere in this world. It's somewhere. It's in my head. And this is another place inside my head that I was painting at the time. And as you can see, it's developing a more tropical feel, which might have been part of me beginning to think about what I was doing in terms of after school. I decided I'd go traveling. Here's a picture again from Herat. Because going to India was a really good experience for me. I traveled overland, got the bus from Victoria bus station and traveled eastwards until I arrived in India, which in those days was possible. This is a drawing done near Manali, and you can see written on it the word Botocha, which I had not quite sure, but the children kept saying it to me as I was drawing. So I figured it must mean something like good. In fact, it means very good, Botocha. And this is also near Manali, which was the first place I stayed in India. It was a marvelous place. Everybody was completely stoned out their head and spent their entire time sitting in small cafes staring at walls. And I couldn't understand it because it was amazing. So instead I walked around in the landscape and drawing pictures. And then I arrived in Banaras. Ooh, this is the river in Banaras, the river Ganga, which is just this broad, expansive landscape. And it's the most unusual city. And this is a picture of my Hindi teacher. Because I was sitting in a tea shop in Banaras and saying, I was thinking I'd like to learn English. And this man said to me, well, why don't you teach Hindi as well? Why don't you teach English at the same time as you learn Hindi? So I taught English and learned Hindi. And then I'd learn in the evenings in the class, and then in the day I'd sit around drawing pictures. And people in India like to talk, so they come up to you while you're drawing and they say, what are you doing? What are you drawing? And the normal answer is the thing that you're standing in front of now. So the most effective technique for dealing with this, I realized, was to talk to people and say, now please move aside, let's have a talk about what's going on. Or to find some way to sit above where they could stand in front of me. So it meant it was a very interactive process. And one of the important things I think about sketching and drawing in this sense is that in most cases, I remember something about the interactions I had while I was drawing these pictures or painting them. And then sometimes as well, I took pictures and paintings and sketches that I'd made, and then later on I'd make oil paintings or other pictures from them. So often I'd do dozens and dozens of sketches on site, and then later do oil paintings or acrylics based on them. This is a particularly beautiful spot which is just near to where I was living in Banaras. It's called Chaitsing Ghat. And it's probably the most scenic ghat from my viewpoint in Banaras. And this is an alleyway just near where I used to live. So it's like you are able to, in my view, Banaras is a city which is like moving directly into your dreams. The difference between living in the UK and London and visiting Banaras and living there was to move from the daytime world to a nighttime world of dreams, but a world of dreams which was also present in the day. This is in fact a painting done as a kind of a fantasy based on the same scene as you've just seen at Chaitsing Ghat, but at night time. These are some of my people I lived with, because the other thing was that I chose normally while I was living in Banaras in those days to live with families who didn't speak any English, so that I get more access to just living the lifestyle of local people. And these are my people in my household at that time. Sonu and Manju here, still both there. I know what they're doing these days. In the typical way of India, one of them now lives in the house because she married into it, and the other one now lives out the house because she's moved out with her husband. This is another picture from another period. So I've always been interested in these combinations of things you might find. This is actually from just about when I was finishing my BA. And as a kind of way to relax from studying, I also painted. And you can see that I got more Indian influence into my geometric pictures, which were there earlier on. So the op art became fused with Indian art themes. This is actually Sri Yantra, I believe, in parts. And this is based on an architectural motif from India, which you can often see if you lie on your back and look at the ceilings of buildings in Hindu temples. You have very similar kind of patterns to this. It's quite big. This is a gouache painting, about 24 inches by 36 inches. This, on the other hand, is a tiny 7-inch by 5-inch watercolour, which might have been done somewhere in East Anglia. But I can't actually remember in this case. I did hundreds of pictures like this in different places. So just capturing a moment. I thought, Emily said that watercolour is very uncontrollable. This is also a watercolour, but shows you if you do it with some slowness and precision, you can do hundreds of layers and actually get something quite different. This was done on the solstice in 1995 in North London. This was done in Bodh Gaya in India, about 2003. There's a bit of a gap there, never mind. But the main point is that it's wonderful because when I look at that picture now, I can immediately remember sitting there on the Tara temple, painting that picture, and this I can remember sitting in the Burmese Vihar and looking out the back of it. This scene would now be completely different. One of the unfortunate or fortunate things about life is that I paint these things and it's just a moment in time, and then it's gone in many cases. And even apparently timeless views, like this is Belongil Beach near Byron Bay in Australia. Actually, this beach washed away in a big storm 2 years later, so it doesn't look anything like that any longer. This is Madison, Wisconsin, 2007. A beautiful place. I went there for the South Asian Studies Conference, but I found I was fascinated by the lake, the whole series of lakes around the town there. This is just near where I come from in Australia, on the Dandenong Hills. And again, watercolour is a great medium. I was very impressed by Emily talking about different mediums. And sometimes one medium seems right, and sometimes another seems right. And watercolour is great for landscapes, when you're standing there. I also, at this point, got into oil colours and went and did a kind of careful phase of oil colours of still lifes, which is kind of strange because it means you kind of focus on life in your house or in a studio in a quite different way. But it's nice, because I feel, because it's like limbering up, exercising. This is outside of my house in Melbourne, looking at the forest which grows in the front of it. So as you can see, I vary between realism and not very realism. I also do an awful lot of sketching as I wander around. I'm never sure whether many of the pictures are particularly good, but whether they're good or not doesn't matter to some extent. It's just the point is that it's some way that enables me to interact with that spot which I'm in at the time. And sometimes, if I'm fortunate, it also looks very good at the end as well, and reminds me in a way, and crystallizes that moment in time. And I think that's a great thing about art, is the way that it crystallizes moments. So I remember standing up on the hill. I like standing up on hills to make pictures. This is standing up on another hill, looking at about 40 kilometres distance. My house overlooks Melbourne. Not directly. I overlook another house. But nearby it overlooks Melbourne. So it's wonderful to have those great views and landscapes all around you. And watercolour is a great medium for catching that. Although it doesn't always work. So there's hundreds which don't work for every one that does work, you might argue.